So last Shabbat, we it was when we the way we left off was when Joseph took Benjamin as his slave because he said that he stole the goblet that belonged to Joseph, and the brothers don't know that that this is Joseph yet. And the whole story, they sold him, and he spent 22 years in Egypt, and now he's the last Shabbat we read how he came out of the pit, out of the darkness into the great light. And we also said that interestingly, it was we read it during the shortest day of the year, which was the darkest. It was December 20th, but Sunday would have been the 21st. And it was the eighth candle of Hanukkah, which means coming out of darkness into a great light. That's the concept of last week. So Joseph became the viceroy of Egypt, and then there's a famine in the land. He solved Pharaoh's dream, and he told them there are going to be 7 years of famine of prosperity, and you should really um, save from the 7 years of the prosperity, and then for the 7 years of famine that will be very harsh, you should then be able to supply food for the people. So that was last week. Then the brothers come to get food. They don't recognize Joseph. He, of course, recognizes them. He gives them food. He treats them nicely, but he wants a collateral to be left with him, which was originally Simeon, and until Benjamin comes, and then Benjamin comes, and now they're all back on their way. He sends them with a lot of food, but he plants the a goblet in Benjamin's sack, and then he chased them. So he ordains this whole drama to be able to hold Benjamin back as a slave. And Maimonides says that you really do tshuva, repentance, when you are faced with the same situation and you act differently. So now the brothers are in the same situation as they were with Joseph 22 years ago. Here they are, and he could be sold as a slave or stay there as a slave, and they can just go home. But then again, they would have to face their father, another son of Rachel, that is now is gone. So this is the situation that our parsha begins when Judah approaches Joseph. And we really need to understand this is dramatic. This is one of of course, the most dramatic, if not the most dramatic scenario in the whole, I would say probably the whole Bible, because as we've been explaining, Joseph, his whole idea was to search for his brothers. When he goes to see how they are when they sell him, he meets somebody on the way, and he asks for directions, and the man asks him, "What are you looking for?" And he says, "I am looking for my brothers." And this concept of "I'm looking for my brothers," as opposed to "Am I my brother's keeper?" Is the whole concept of Israel, the whole concept of of a people who God gives the Torah and in order to bring heaven to earth. And the most heavenly life you can live on earth is when you care for your brethren. That really is the whole point. That Israel arevim ze lazeh, that all Israel is accountable for each other. But of course, it expands. It starts with Israel, but it expands to other people and, of course, the world. And we have to care about humankind and animals and everything, of course, in this world. But you start with your kin, your the closest kin to you. So he's ordaining a situation that he now has to see how they would act with Benjamin. And Judah, this is how our parasha begins. Vayigash. The parasha is called Vayigash. And the word Vayigash, it means approach, but it means to approach somebody with a with a purpose, with a purpose. So now you have, now Judah still doesn't know that Joseph is who he is. He thinks he's speaking to the Pharaoh's deputy. So he approaches him because he feels like there's nothing for him to lose. He promised his father that he will bring Benjamin back. Joseph didn't want to send Benjamin, but he promised him. He said, I'm going to be accountable for him with my life. So this is now the moment that Judah has to show that he is willing to give up his life for his brother. Now, I have to say, I'm going to take a little segue, which is to show, fast forward to the situation that Israel is in now. Mm-hmm. The whole idea of the hostages, the 2 years of Israel struggling with the hostages. Look at what Israel did for its hostages. Now it became political and there were two sides of it, but everybody was giving their life to save to get the hostages one way or another. Many soldiers died in the war going in, rescuing them. All the delegations that went around the world. I mean, Israel was focused on the hostages for now 2 years, and in this case, there were hundreds of hostages. But even if it was one hostage, when Gilad Shalit was the hostage for 5 years, so we really have shown that we care about our own people, and we want to save them. So now Judah and Joseph, they're not just the two brothers. This is a lot more. This is a lot deeper than that. Why? Because Judah belongs to the house of Leah, and Joseph is the house of Rachel. So in our parasha now, when we begin, we have these two sides that they have to now approach. And our rabbis tell us that until Judah and Joseph are in peace, we will not have peace in Israel. We will not have messianic times and healing and all that. Now, as we will look at the text, we'll see that Joseph was very maybe forgiving in his acts, but it doesn't say explicitly that he forgave his brothers. And that's a very interesting and nuance that the rabbis find, that Yes, there was reconciliation, which was very, very important, but it was not a complete reconciliation. And we will look at the text and we will see what what is it's foreshadowing. Joseph and Judah are now, we're talking about before the Israelites, of course, become even slaves in Egypt, before they leave, before they receive the Torah, before they build the temple and everything. But we know that later on, there will be two kingdoms. The people of Israel, even though we're 13 tribes, we will be split into two kingdoms, the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Ephraim, the kingdom of Israel in the north and the south. These two kingdoms are the two sides of the Jacob's house, the Leah and the Rachel. The kingdom of Judah, literally Judah, and Ephraim is the son of Joseph. So this is when Judah now approaches Joseph, it has such a reverberating effect that will last for forever. So okay, so then it says that Judah approached Joseph, approached him, and said, "My Lord, let your servant appeal to my Lord, as do not it be impatient with your servant." So he understands that this is now it's going to be the speech of his life, because Joseph in a second he can just do this and they can all die. So he has to really make sure every word is comes from a very authentic place. And then he kind of reiterates the what happened to them with Joseph and how Joseph asked them to come back to Egypt with their young brother, and they told him that the father can't let go of this child because if something happens to him, he will surely die. And he really gives it all. And in a sense, he's willing to die. His speech, the essence of his speech means that he's willing to die for his brother. That's basically what it means. So we're not going to go over the whole speech because it's just he's reiterating, but at the end, he says, "For how can I go back to my father unless the boy is with me? Let me not be witness to the woe that would overtake my father." So he's speaking not as he's not rebuking Joseph per se. He's just saying, I am not going to be able to live with this. My life is over if you keep this boy. I remember a few years ago when forget the name of this reporter. She was on CNN. Her sister she did a documentary about North Korea, and then she was able to come back home, but her sister then did some investigative reporting, and she was captured, and she was there for like 6 months or something. And I remember how she was explaining when they were appealing to the North Korean government, they were not saying, "Hey, you kidnapped my sister from the Chinese border. You didn't have right to do that." It's really the same situation. They were appealing to them, to their heart and mercy. So until Bill Clinton went there and got them back. Remember, it was a big deal a few years ago. So then he clearly touches the heart of Joseph, And if you if you want to imagine the scenario, it's like David with his stone hitting Goliath's exact point in his forehead. So clearly, Judah points directly to that spot, the soft spot. And now this big drama begins that the text will kind of unpack the text and see amazing things in it. So Joseph, we're in chapter 45 now in Genesis, and Joseph could no longer control himself before all the attendants. And he cried out, "Have everyone withdraw from me." So they clear everybody, and he stayed with his brothers alone. He said there was no one else about when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. So can you imagine this scenario? This man that they had no idea, but because the midrashim say they ask a big question, like, how seriously you really couldn't identify your brother? I know, of course, the Egyptians wear all the costumes, and they may have makeup and everything else, and of course he changed after 22 years, but the Talmud tells us that Joseph looked exactly like his father. He was a spit image of his father. So really, beyond all that, you couldn't, if it's your brother, you can't recognize him. So one of the answers I give, I didn't see it written anywhere. Of course, what the commentaries say is that they really, sometimes something is right in front of you, but you can't see it, right? Because you don't want to see it, or in your mind, you're so locked into one thing that it's just impossible for you to see it, even though it's right in front of you. And most commentaries explain it that way, that they, in their mind, they sold their brother 22 years ago as a slave. There's no way that he would be, even though he looked like their brother maybe, or their father. And there's something suspicious about this man, because when they sat to eat, when we were reading last week, he sat them in the order of their birth. How would he know that? So they thought maybe he's really a magician. He has some, as Deborah said, ESPN. Um, but he has some sort of access to, some sort of secrets, but they don't put it together. So now he reveals himself, and look what even happened after. It says have everyone. So he revealed him to his brother. His sobs were so loud that the Egyptians could hear, and so the news reached Pharaoh's palace. Wow. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still well?" And actually in Hebrew is my father still alive, not still well. And we will explain that in a little bit. And it says, but his brothers could not answer him. So dumbfounded were they on account of him. So it's nivhalu. They panicked. They couldn't compute this situation. This is trauma. So even after he reveals himself, they couldn't answer him. They couldn't see him yet. And this is very interesting. And this is where that's my explanation. I haven't seen it anywhere, but the reason they never were identifying him before he revealed himself, and still had an issue with grasping this is because if you remember when um, when he was telling them his dreams back home when he was a lad, it says that they couldn't even say hello to him. They hated him so much they couldn't even say hello to him, meaning they didn't want to even see his face. And then when he comes to look for them when they're shepherding before they sell him, it says that they saw him from afar and they decided to kill him. And the Talmud tells us that they saw him from afar, not just physically. They were so removed from him emotionally. They saw him from afar. So the whole relationship was so broken that they really, even though he looked like their father and something was odd about everything, they literally could not, they saw him from afar still. That's why it didn't really matter. So now he's approaching them, he's in their face, and they can't answer him. And it's interesting because it's the same word that it's used when they couldn't say hello to him in the beginning. So this is the situation they're in. And again, there's another layer here, which is fascinating because, we're talking about two messiahs really in Judaism. We don't talk just about the Messiah, the son of David. We tend to refer to the Messiah as the son of David, but there's a whole concept of the Messiah, the son of Joseph. And the son of Joseph, the Messiah from the Joseph, is the harbinger for the Messiah from the house of Judah. Meaning, there's something about the Joseph part that could not be divorced of the Messiah of Judah, and we can take a look at it as we continue. But the idea that redemption and messianic times and we are commanded to pray for redemption. One of the 5 questions that the Talmud lists that we will be asked when we go up to heaven is, have you always looked for redemption? Meaning, have you at any moment were ready if the Messiah came and your reality now changed? Let's say you're dealing with physical issues or financial issues or relationship issues, any issue that you for years deal with, and you pray and you pray and you wish and you hope and all that. But do you really, if something happened and overnight it'll be solved, will you really be ready to embrace it? Or like you'll be like the brothers, they're dumbfounded. They're not, they can't grasp it. So the way Joseph revealed himself to the brothers was the way that God sends his redemption. It's when it's time, it's in a snap. Just like Joseph was hurried out of the pit too, overnight, to become the viceroy of Egypt. So they are shocked and they can't answer him. I want to get back to Joseph's question about is my father still alive? In Hebrew, is ha'od avi chai. It's not, is he well? So, of course, this is an interpretation. The English translation, is he well, is an interpretation of trying to explain Why he asked this question? Because he knows his father is alive. They keep telling him about the father, that he's back in Canaan, and he couldn't separate from his younger son, and so they've been talking about the father. So he knows that physically he's alive. But the question is really, is he alive spiritually? Which means, like they were shocked and dumbfounded to to accept Joseph. So his question is, if I now come back to my father and tell him, Father, I'm still alive, I'm still here, it's Joseph, I didn't die, will he be able to grasp this? That's really what he's saying, is hope. Does he still have hope in his heart? And so they continue to again, the brothers are silent, but Joseph continues, and it's one of my, I have to say, favorite texts in the whole Bible, because it is such, it's so powerful, and so also theological, because what he says now is the essence of how a human being should strive to be in order to be spiritually healthy. And he says to them, then Joseph said to his brothers, come forward to me. And when they came forward, he said, I am your brother Joseph, he whom you sold into Egypt. So there's already something here in terms of reconciliation. This is considered this Shabbat of big reconciliation that the two sides, but the reason that it's not fully a full reconciliation, the Talmud and the rabbis are telling us there are clues within the text that will show us this is a beginning, but it's not the full redemption, the full reconciliation. So he tells them, he reminds them that they sold him to Egypt. And every reconciliation, I mean, we tend to think that we should just move on, we should just forget it, and just let's forget about it and let's start again and flip the page. No, that's the Torah shows us over and over and over again, and later on in the rest of the Bible, that for a true reconciliation, you have to speak about what happened. Abram does it with Avimelech. Isaac does it with the shepherds of Gerar. Joseph is doing it here. David will do it later on. There's no way to just say, let's forget about it. We're not people who forget. We are all about memory and remembrance. So we're not going to just say, all right, it is what it is. So he reminds them that they sold him, meaning you are to blame. I'm not absolving you of your sin. But he says, and this is the most beautiful verse, really. He says, now do not be distressed or reproach yourself because you sold me hither. It was to save life that God sent me ahead of you. And he says, it is now 2 years of the famine, so you need to hurry up and come back so I can provide for you. And he said, God has sent me ahead of you to ensure your survival on earth and to see your lives to save your life in an extraordinary deliverance. It really is amazing. And there's another, of course, the verse later on where he says, You you thought to do something bad, but God saw it to do something good out of it. And that really is the essence of health, spiritual health, because the Talmud tells us that the most um, kind of a stressful question that people have, theological question that people have, is how come good people suffer or bad people are successful? So how do you reconcile that? So really, what Joseph does, because his story is all about, I was framed. I was framed twice. Once I was sold by my brothers to Egypt for no reason. Then in Egypt, I was sent to jail for no reason. And what is this? I am a righteous person, and I'm going through all these bad episodes. So he comes out of the other side and says, my lesson here is that, and that's what he tells Pharaoh before he solves his dreams. He says, Bil Adai, the word Bil Adai, without me. This is God is turning this world. So I don't know the accounting of things, but all I know that you may think something bad, but something very good can come out of that situation. So if we live like that, then we are, like Psalm 23 says, Al mei menuchotin ahaleni. Can conduct my life over calm waters. There's no ups and downs, because life always provides or gives us the ups and downs, but it's up to us to stay level, like calm water. So then he tells them to go and to that he will provide for them, and they should hurry up and bring their fathers. And then it says, um, and then he says to them, and you must tell my father everything about my high station in Egypt and all that you have seen, and bring my father here with all speed. Now, there's another big question here that is asked by probably all the rabbis and commentators over the centuries. One big question: how come Joseph didn't call home? It's been 9 years now. Let's say before he couldn't, when he was a servant and he was in jail. But now he's telling them this is now the second year after into the famine, which means they already had the 7 years of plenty, and now the 2 years. So 9 years at least that he could have sent a messenger. And some say, oh, he could have went there himself, but I think that doesn't make sense, that he himself would go, because he has to manage the country. So, but he could easily send a messenger. But there's something, of course, very deep here, and the best explanation that I've heard over the years is that he could not tell his father that he is alive before he resolves the issue with the brothers, for a couple of reasons. One, there is an explanation that says that when the brothers brought the tunic, the bloody tunic of Joseph to their father, and said, Joseph was devoured by a wild beast. Jacob knew that he was not. Somehow he knew that that was not his blood, that that's not the way he was devoured. But he knew one thing, that the brothers hated Joseph so much that they have orchestrated somehow a way to get rid of him. So Joseph knew that if he now approaches his father all these years, he would frame the brothers, one, and then it wouldn't do anything, because if he hasn't solved the issue with the brothers, it's not gonna bring peace. So now he can approach the father, because he made peace with the brothers. And now it says that with that, he embraced his brother Benjamin around the neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. So, of course, the English translation kind of misses a very important nuance here. It says that it's not the neck, but actually necks. It's in plural. It's so vayipol al tzavarei. It's not tzavar, it's tzavarei. So they each fell and wept on each other's necks, in plural. And the Talmud asked this question: why not neck? Why not, like the translation makes more sense, in singular? And this is where the Talmud tells us it's a foreshadowing of later on that this is a reconciliation, but this is not the final reconciliation, because the plurality here indicates the two temples that will be destroyed in Jerusalem. And of course, there will be the temples of the Israel kingdom that will be destroyed as well, and the exile and all that. So what they're crying now over is, they're very, of course, emotional about the reconciliation and about the past, but they're also are crying because they know what is still coming, that Israel and Judah, the Judah and Joseph sides, are not fully reconciled. And as a result, when we're not reconciled with each other, house divided, and the brokenness, and of course, the exile and destruction and all that, God brings all these things when we're not united. So, and then he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. Only then were his brothers able to talk to him. So another thing here about reconciliation is the crying. The crying also comes as a reconciliation in another time on the Jewish calendar. Any idea? The day of repentance. This is repentance. The day of repentance. I mean, there are 10 days of repentance, but the day of repentance, Yom Kippur, then there's an obligation to cry. Because only when you cry, it is equal to all the prayers and all the requests for forgiveness, because it comes from such a natural place that it's so authentic that you know that there's a real repentance here. And I tell the story, just a minute, Leah. I always tell the story about when I was growing up in the Yemenite synagogue, and there was once a year. Again, I never traced it to once a year. In my mind, it was once in a while. The rabbi led the service, and he normally didn't lead the service. There were people who would lead the service, but he would lead the service, and then he would cry. And I have to say, it took me years later to put it together that he was crying on Yom Kippur. asking for forgiveness for the congregation, and because it's an obligation to cry. So it was incredible. So the only then they were able to speak to him after they cried, after they cleansed themselves and were authentically kind of forgiven, not forgiven yet, but reconciled. Leah, you wanted to ask something?
Doesn't the Kaddish, the the prayer for the day that you say every when you lose a parent, it's Kaddish, right?
The Kaddish, yes.
Doesn't that stand for the crying?
You're supposed to cry in when you are in mourning. Yes, absolutely. When you do the kriya. Oh, the kriya, yeah, the kriya, not the kaddish. The kriya, the tearing of the garment when you hear of someone's death, a close
I don't use the word contrite, but not everybody, you know, can does physically, with tears and all of that.
right. It doesn't always happen, right, that people cry. That's why actually traditionally in uh earlier times, and there's still traditions that have done it not too long ago, they bring wailers, that women who cry, to entice crying, because it says when Abraham, if you remember when we talked about the first funeral in the Bible, is when Abraham buries Sarah, and it says that he eulogized her and then he cried for her. So the crying is part of because again, crying is reconciliation. Crying is reconciling with the new reality. And until you cry, you really can't release it. So crying is essential. Is essential. I know we live in a world that want us to be tough and, oh, men don't cry and but that's nonsense. Of course, this is the spiritual strength. To arrive spiritual strength, you have to cry, because if you don't, you hold on extra weight that you need to release.
But Rabbi,
Yes.
just say the crying just doesn't come, so can that be represented by a forced sound of?
Yeah, that's why they would bring the wailers that would entice. But if somebody can't cry, they can't cry. But you do everything possible to bring them. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yes. Yes. That was very common in funerals. So now, he gives them everything he can possibly give them, and they go back to Jacob, and now he does something here which is really we need to understand for reconciliation, for redemption, essential. He does what he says. To each of them, moreover, he gave a change of clothing, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and several changes of clothing. Now, what's wrong with this picture? I mean, he himself was the subject of jealousy because his father gave him preferential treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole drama happened because of the preferential treatment. What are you doing? But that is something that we have to understand, that is so critical in Judaism and in the Torah. There is preferential treatment. I know it's terrible to think about it, and it's terrible because it's not politically correct. And we want everybody to be equal in many ways. But the Torah tells us we're not equal. And some people will have more than others. Some people will suffer more than others. Some people will be healthier than others. There is no such thing as everybody is the same. That's called communism. And communism, I remember the same documentary that I saw with, it was, oh, Lisa Lang. I mean, when you see the videos of all these people bowing down to the picture of their supreme leader, and they're all the same. And when they sit in parliament, they are all dressed the same. And when they walk out, I mean, it's scary. This is exactly what we're not. We have to deal with chosenness. It's very challenging, but it is the truth. And the idea of chosen is that we are the chosen people. Again, that doesn't mean that we're better in everything, but there's something about the Jewish people that God chose. And within the Jewish people, there's a tribe that God chose to manage the temple. And within the tribe, there's one family that was chosen to be the high priest. So there's always going to be chosenness in this world. Cain and Abel, God accepted Abel's sacrifice and not Cain. But that didn't give Cain the right to kill Abel. And that is Jacob, even after later on, when Jacob comes to Egypt and he has to bless the children of Joseph, and he crosses his hand. And Joseph tries to move his hand. And he said, you are giving the first blessing to the younger, not to the older. You're making a change here. And Jacob says, I know what I'm doing. It's not about the birth order. It's not about this system that we put. It's about merit. If he is the one that is more appropriate for the role, he's going to be chosen, and he will get ordained, and he will be in a different role. And we need to get our mind wrapped around this very, very important concept, because otherwise there's no full reconciliation. If we have that jealousy and that, oh, look at what this guy has and I don't have, the coveting, right? There's no way that we'll be fully reconciled. And he does that to see what the brothers are going to, how they're going to react. Are they going to be now jealous of Benjamin and treat him poorly because he just received some sort of preferential treatment? And that really is, we'll have to follow this along the generations to see that really doesn't happen. But as we know, the two sides kept quarreling afterwards, and this was a good beginning of reconciliation, but this was not fully full reconciliation. That's why we're hoping for a Messiah from the house of Joseph, and Messiah from the house of David or Judah, that will come together finally in a full reconciliation. And then we have to be ready that it can happen any moment and not be dumbfounded when it happens.